Give me that damn paper. I grabbed the hood of Lucas's sweatshirt in one fist, the shoddy cotton fraying between my fingers. The 16-year-old boy stood as rigid as a stubborn young bull, his back taut, clutching a letter of acceptance from Chicago Community College tightly to his chest. One corner of the paper, smudged with his sweat, had already blurred the ink. A subway roared past outside, shaking the tin roof of our rental so violently that it rattled, splitting his voice into ragged fragments. This is my future, Carmen. You can't keep doing this. I laughed bitterly, my hand swinging back before slapping him across the face. When my palm connected with his burning cheek, a numbness shot up my own arm. He'd grown so fast. Last year, he'd barely reached my shoulder. Now he could look down at me with that mixture of disappointment and contempt that made my skin crawl. Future. I stepped over the litter of beer cans on the floor, pressing my cigarette butt into the scholarship application he'd spread on the table. The charred mark that bloomed looked like an ugly scar. When I won 3 hands in a row at Lucky Star Casino, you were still in diapers. A futures for dishwashers scraping by on $15 an hour. You're living the good life with me, roof over your head, food in your stomach. Lucas's head snapped up, his eyes red as if they were bleeding. He shoved me hard. I stumbled backward into the wall, my lower back slamming into the envelope I'd hidden in the baseboard, the $3,000 I'd skimmed from the living expenses Sophia had sent yesterday, money I planned to use to recoup my losses tonight. Living the good life? He screamed, his voice thick with sobs. Was it the good life when the power got cut last month and I did my homework by candlelight? When my classmates laughed at me for not having sneakers, when I wore socks with holes in them all winter? Now I've got a grant, I only need you to cover $1,500 for tuition, and you're gonna blow it on gambling? Shut up. I lunged forward to clamp a hand over his mouth, but he bit me hard. The metallic taste of blood welled up on my finger, and suddenly I was transported back to when he was little, burning with a fever. Sophia had held him in line at the emergency room while I cheered over a straight flush at the casino. He'd been 5 then, delirious with heat, yet still clinging to the hem of my shirt, begging, "Don't run away, Mom." But now, the light in his eyes was gone, replaced by the same rigid integrity that Sophia had, an integrity that made me squirm all over. The door burst open. Sophia stood in the doorway, the smell of tomato sauce from the Italian restaurant clinging to her clothes. She'd just gotten off work. Her apron was still tied around her waist. When she saw the envelope in my hand and the slap mark on Lucas's face, her expression darkened instantly. "Carmen, give me the money." Her voice was calm, but it unsettled me more than Lucas's yelling ever could. My oldest daughter had always been more level-headed than me. At 15, she'd started washing dishes at a restaurant to pay for Lucas's school fees. Now, thanks to her Spanish, she'd worked her way up to head waitress, sending me a steady stream of money every month without ever asking how I spent it. This is my money. I tucked the envelope into my chest. Sophia, you've spoiled your brother rotten. He's dead set on this useless community college, but he'd be better off learning the ropes at the casino with me. Someday he'll end up like you. She cut me off, the tomato sauce stains on her apron jiggling as she moved. 40 years old, living in a rat-infested rental, gambling away his daughter's hard-earned cash until dawn. She pulled a stack of neatly folded bills from her bag and set them in front of Lucas. "I'll pay for your tuition. I already applied for housing assistance at the school, you can move into the dorms next week." Tears finally spilled down Lucas's face as he looked from the money to Sophia, but he bit his lip so hard he wouldn't make a sound, a habit he'd picked up in 8th grade, when I'd gambled away his tuition and he'd had to borrow old textbooks from the community center, crying all the while. I trembled with rage, pointing a finger at Sophia's nose. "You ungrateful brat. I gave birth to you, raised you, and brought you to America from Puerto Rico when you were 18. Now you're ganging up on me with an outsider?" "An outsider?" Sophia's voice rose sharply. Last year, when Lucas had appendicitis, you took the medical bills I sent you and gambled them away. A nurse noticed he had no one looking after him and called me. I raced back there in the middle of the night. He was lying in that hospital bed, burning up, and he still asked me, "Is Mom in trouble again?" Meanwhile, you were winning at the casino, drinking champagne with a bunch of strangers. Her words seared into my chest like a red-hot iron. I did remember that day. After winning, the waiter had brought free champagne, and I'd even forgotten to call the hospital. But I couldn't admit I was wrong. I lifted my chin defiantly. I was networking. When I hit the big time, it won't just be appendicitis. I'll get him the best heart surgeon money can buy. The best surgeon in the world can't fix a life you've ruined. Lucas spoke up suddenly, his voice raw and hoarse. In 7th grade, I qualified for the city's youth math competition. It cost $200 to enter. You told me you'd save the money to buy me new shoes, then you lost it all to Mrs. Jones next door. You got me a pair of too tight leather shoes from the flea market, and the heel fell off halfway through the competition. Everyone laughed at me. He rolled up his pant leg, revealing a faint scar on his ankle. I ran to pick up the heel and fell down the steps. It still hurts when it rains. I turned my face away, unable to look at that scar. Back then, I'd always promised, "I'll make it up to you next time," but there was always another game waiting for me. Sophia pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her bag and slapped it down in front of me. It was a copy of that math competition certificate, the one Lucas had mended with tape so many times the edges were frayed. He washed dishes at a restaurant for 2 weeks to earn the money for the next competition. He won first place. You never even asked him what he wanted, Carmen. Just then, the doorbell rang. I thought it was the landlord come to collect rent, so I scrambled to hide the certificate. But when I opened the door, it was Anna, Marcos's wife, holding a fruit basket. She took in the mess of the room and the tension on our 3 faces, and froze. Marcos told me. Anna's arrival felt like a lifeline. I dragged her inside, pointing at Sophia and Lucas as I sobbed. Look at these two. I slaved to raise them, and now that they're grown, they're ganging up on me. Lucas is dead set on this useless college, and Sophia's cutting off my money. Anna didn't respond. Instead, she looked at the slap mark on Lucas's face, then at the acceptance letter on the table. She sighed, pulling an envelope from her bag. Marcos sent me with this. It was for your rent. But now. She handed the envelope to Sophia. You should hold on to it. We all know life's been hard for you, Carmen, but it's been harder for the kids. When Aunt Rosa lent you her pension, you gambled it away. Now she has to collect scrap to make ends meet. She gave it to me voluntarily. I stamped my foot. I told her I'd pay her back. Pay her back with what? With the money you keep saying you'll win back from the tables? Anna's voice turned cold. At the Christmas party last year, you stole Lucy's diamond ring and pawned it, said you needed it for an emergency. If Lucy hadn't been so kind, she would have called the cops. We're family, not your personal ATM. She turned to Sophia. I'll tell Marcos we should send any family support directly to you from now on. Anna's words doused my last spark of confidence. I stared at the 2 stacks of money in Sophia's hands and lunged for them, but Lucas grabbed my wrist, holding it tight. The 16-year-old was stronger than I'd realized, and his eyes were filled with nothing but disappointment. Mom, wake up. Wake up. I wrenched my hand free. When I was up at the crack of dawn working the sugar cane fields in Puerto Rico, sleeping 4 hours a night just to save up for our tickets to America, where were you two? I'm just trying to win enough to give you a good life, and this is how you repay me. Sophia stepped in front of me, her eyes tired. We don't want a good life built on gambling. I started washing dishes at 15, making $8 an hour. I know how hard every penny is to earn. I want Lucas to go to school, to get a job where he doesn't have to grovel. I don't want him ending up like you, betting his whole life on a deck of cards. She paused. I asked for the night shift at the restaurant. With 2 jobs, I can cover his tuition and living expenses. You don't have to worry about us anymore. He's my brother, not an outsider. Sophia's eyes were as cold as a Chicago winter. From today on, I won't send you a single cent. Either you quit gambling and get a job, or you keep sinking deeper, but don't drag Lucas down with you. Drag him down? I burst out laughing, a harsh, brittle sound that brought tears to my eyes. If I'd left you 2 in that Puerto Rican orphanage, I'd be living in a Miami house with a pool by now. Lucas, you remember this, without me, you wouldn't even be breathing American air. Anna shook her head softly. Carmen, children aren't your bargaining chips. This is none of your business. I shouted, driving her away. When I turned back to Lucas, he was standing there, his shoulders trembling slightly. Suddenly, he pulled an old tin box out of his backpack, the one I'd bought him for his 10th birthday, the one he used to store all his treasures. He opened it, revealing stacks of crumpled change and a few old photos of me when I was young. I saved this money to buy you a new coat. Winter's coming. He dumped the coins onto the table. But now I don't want to. You say you love me, Carmen, but your love's never been worth as much as a single card at the casino. I stared at the coins, and suddenly I remembered, every day after school, he'd collected plastic bottles, and I'd thought he was saving up for comic books. Something sharp twisted in my chest, but the urge to gamble was screaming in my bones, making it impossible to back down. I don't need your lousy change. I swept the coins off the table. They clattered to the floor, a mocking jingle that echoed through the room. Lucas knelt down and started picking up the coins one by one, his movements slow but steady. Sophia knelt beside him, and the 2 of them, backs pressed together, formed a wall I couldn't get past. I'd rather have grown up in an orphanage than have a mom like you. When he'd picked up the last coin, he stood, his eyes dry and resolute. Carmen, from today on, you're not my mother anymore. I froze, as if seeing my son for the first time. He'd always followed me around as a kid, even when I yelled at him or hit him. Every night, he'd leave a glass of warm milk by my bed. But now, all the affection in his eyes was gone, replaced by unshakable resolve. Standing next to Sophia, they looked like 2 mountains, pressing down on me until I could barely breathe. Sophia didn't spare me another glance. She helped Lucas gather his acceptance letter and the money, wiping the last of the tears from his face. Don't worry, she said softly. I'll take care of you from now on. They packed their things and walked out, the slamming of the door ringing in my ears. I stared at the empty doorway, then grabbed a beer bottle off the table and hurled it against the wall. The glass shattered into 1,000 pieces, just like my life. That night, I still went to Lucky Star Casino. The neon light stretched my shadow long across the sidewalk. The valet smiled as he greeted me. Miss Carmen, your luck's gotta be hot tonight. I held up the envelope, my mind fixed on one thought, win enough to make Sophia and Lucas regret what they'd done. At first, everything went my way. I turned 3,000 into 10,000. Gamblers crowded around to watch, the dealer nodded at me respectfully. But by midnight, my luck took a nosedive. The cards turned against me, and I kept raising the stakes like I was possessed. When the final card was dealt, I'd lost every cent. It was dawn by the time I stumbled out of the casino. A cold autumn wind cut through Chicago, and I pulled my thin jacket tight around me, only to realize I didn't even have money for the subway. I walked back to the rental along the train tracks, passing the Italian restaurant where Sophia worked. Through the window, I saw her helping an old woman push a wheelchair, the sunlight glowing on her, warm, bright, and painful to look at. Suddenly, I remembered how she'd saved her school lunches for me when she was little, saying she wasn't hungry. Back then, I hadn't been hooked on gambling yet. I'd worked in a garment factory, and even though the pay was lousy, we'd had a few good years, crammed together in a small apartment. When had everything gone wrong? Probably when the factory closed and I lost my job, when I'd wandered into a casino on a whim and won a few $100s. That feeling of getting something for nothing, like a drug, it had hooked me fast. When I got back to the rental, I ransacked every corner, but found only 20 crumpled dollars. The landlord's eviction notice was taped to the door, the word overdue scrawled in red. I tried calling Sophia, but her phone was off. I called my brother Marcos in Miami, and as soon as he heard my voice, he started yelling. "Carmen, how dare you call me? Sophia and Anna told me everything. You gambled away her money, you hit Lucas. And that $5,000 I lent you for your gallbladder surgery? You blew that on gambling too, didn't you? I can't believe I was stupid enough to help you." He hung up, and when I tried again, the line was busy. I tried Aunt Rosa next. The phone rang for a long time before her son Tony picked up. "Aunt Carmen," his voice was icy. "Mom's crying. She found out you gambled away her pension, she can't sleep at night now. We called the cops. They're investigating the pawn shop where you hawked Lucy's ring. I'll pay it back. I swear I will." I screamed into the phone, but the line went dead. Through the window, I heard my neighbors arguing, and suddenly I was back to when Lucas was little. Every time I'd gotten into a fight with someone, he'd hide behind the door, crying, then run out to tug at my shirt. "Don't be mad, Mom." But now, no one was left to tug at my shirt. I pulled an old suitcase out from under the bed, filled with the relics of my younger years. There was a pink dress I'd bought when I first came to America, worn only once. And a family photo. Sophia was 12, Lucas 5, and I was holding them both, smiling so wide my cheeks hurt. Back then, I'd worked in the garment factory, and even though I was exhausted every night, looking at my kids' smiles had made it all worth it. When had that changed? Maybe when the factory shut down and I lost my job, when I'd gone to the casino with a neighbor just to pass the time and won $500. That rush of easy money, like a drug, it had taken hold of me, dragging me down while I destroyed my own life and my children's hopes along the way. The next morning, I went to the restaurant where Sophia worked, planning to apologize, and beg for money. The place was packed. Sophia was in a clean uniform, taking orders with a polite smile. I hesitated outside, too ashamed to go in, until her break. When she saw me, her face darkened. "What are you doing here?" "Sophia, I'm sorry." I grabbed her hand, softening my voice. "I'll quit gambling, I promise. Just give me another chance. I can wash dishes here, help you out." She pulled her hand away, pulling a piece of paper from her bag. "This is the pawn ticket for Lucy's ring. I got it back, it cost $8,000. Here's an IOU. Sign it. You can pay me back slowly." Her eyes were calm. "I can give you a chance, but Lucas won't. He told me yesterday he's gonna work during breaks. He never wants to see you again." I stared at the IOU, suddenly deflated. I knew even if I signed it, I'd never be able to quit gambling. Sophia must have seen it in my face. "If you really want to change, go to the Community Gambling Addiction Center. They have free counseling. I can help you find a place to stay, but you'll have to earn your own living expenses." I agreed, but even as I spoke, my mind was drifting back to the tables at Lucky Star. That night, I took the $200 Sophia had given me for groceries and went straight to the casino. I told myself I'd just win back enough to pay for Lucy's ring, then quit. But it was the same old story. I lost every cent. As I stumbled out of the casino, I saw Anna standing by the door with a man. When she saw me, she frowned and turned away. In that moment, I knew, I'd lost every last member of my family. The days that followed grew worse and worse. When I went back to the restaurant, Sophia's co-workers blocked the door, telling me she'd gotten a restraining order to keep me away. When I tried to visit Lucas at school, the security guard wouldn't even let me through the gate. Lucas had specifically told him not to let me in. I started begging my relatives for money. At first, a few of them gave me $100 or $200 out of pity, but when they realized I was just gonna gamble it away, they stopped. Aunt Rosa even posted in the family group chat, "No one give Carmen any more money. She's beyond saving, and we're not helping her destroy herself." When winter came, the landlord finally kicked me out. I dragged a suitcase full of rags onto the snow-covered street, with no idea where to go. The casino had banned me, my relatives avoided me like the plague, Sophia and Lucas had vanished without a trace. A stranger handed me a flyer for a homeless shelter, but when I got to the door, I turned around. I couldn't bear the thought of my old friends seeing me like this. In the end, I rented an even worse hovel in the slums, no heat, no hot water, nothing. At night, I had to pile all my clothes on top of me to stay warm. On New Year's Eve, I could hear fireworks outside. I boiled a bowl of instant noodles, but I'd barely taken 2 bites when I burst into tears. Then my phone rang. It was Lucas. I wiped my tears in a hurry and answered, my voice shaking. "Lucas, my baby." "Carmen," his voice was steady, no trace of emotion. "I just wanted to tell you I got the semester scholarship. Sophia got a promotion too. We're doing fine. Also, Marcos and Aunt Rosa, Lucy and I will pay them back. From now on, don't contact us again." As soon as he hung up, I collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. The fireworks outside lit up the sky, casting a bright glow on my cold, empty room, and on the life I'd ruined with my own 2 hands. I thought of the drawing Lucas had made when he was little, me, Sophia, and him, holding hands in the sun. Back then, he'd said, "When I grow up, Mom, I'll buy you a big house with a garden." But I'd pushed him away, gambled away every bit of warmth we'd ever had. I woke up shivering in the middle of the night, my hand brushing against an old photo under my pillow. It was Sophia and Lucas, taken on Lucas's elementary school graduation day. They were both smiling so wide, their eyes shining. I traced their faces with my finger, tears dripping onto the photo until their smiles blurred. I finally understood, I'd never just gambled away money. I'd gambled away my children's love, the only home I'd ever had. But by then, it was too late. Outside, the snow fell harder, as if trying to bury all the city's sins and regrets under a blanket of white. The next morning, I found a half-frozen cat huddled on my doorstep. I let it in, sharing my last can of tuna with it. If I couldn't be a mother to my own children, maybe I could be kind to something. It curled up on my lap, purring, and for a moment, I forgot about the cold and the hunger and the emptiness. But when it started to snow again, the cat left, disappearing into the alley. I didn't blame it, no one wanted to stay in a place as cold as this. I started walking around the neighborhood during the day, picking up empty bottles to sell for change. Once, I saw a group of kids playing basketball in the park, and one of them had Lucas's old jacket, the one with the tear in the sleeve that I'd never gotten around to mending. I stood there watching for a long time, until the kid's mom came over and gave me a funny look. I hurried away, my chest tight. It was the first time I'd realized how many little things I'd missed, how I'd never fixed that jacket, never attended a single one of Lucas's math competitions, never asked Sophia how her first day at the restaurant had gone. One afternoon, I passed a bookstore and saw a poster in the window, Chicago Community College's annual science fair. Lucas's name was on it, next to a photo of him holding a trophy. He looked taller, his hair cut short, and he was smiling, genuinely smiling, the way he hadn't smiled in years. I stood outside the store for an hour, reading the poster over and over. A sales clerk came out and asked if I needed help, but I just shook my head and walked away. I didn't deserve to be proud of him, not after everything I'd done. That night, I found a payphone and called the community college's main office, pretending to be a distant relative. I asked about Lucas's science fair project. The secretary was kind enough to tell me he'd won first place for a robot that could sort recycling, something he'd been working on since he was 10, she said. His sister was there cheering him on, she added. They make a really sweet pair. I thanked her and hung up, the coins clinking in the receiver. For the first time in years, I didn't feel angry or bitter, I just felt sad, a deep, hollow sadness that made it hard to breathe. Winter turned to spring, and the slums started to smell like garbage and blooming dandelions. I got a part-time job at a laundromat, folding clothes for minimum wage. It was boring work, but it kept me busy, and at night, I was too tired to think about gambling. One day, a woman came in with a stack of restaurant uniforms. They had the same logo as Sophia's Italian place. I folded them carefully, running my fingers over the crisp fabric. When the woman came to pick them up, I asked her about the restaurant. She said it had just expanded, and the head waitress, Sophia, was getting married next summer. Her fiancé's a teacher at the community college, she said, smiling. They met when his students came in for lunch. Real sweet story. I didn't say anything, just handed her the uniforms. When she left, I sat down on one of the laundromat chairs and cried, happy tears, for the first time in years. Sophia deserved a good life, a life with someone who would never let her down. Lucas deserved a family who would cheer for his robot projects and fix his jackets when they tore. They'd built that life for themselves, without me, and that was the best thing I could have ever given them, even if it wasn't on purpose. That evening, I bought a postcard from a convenience store. It had a photo of the Chicago skyline on the front. I wrote, "Congratulations on the science fair, Lucas. I'm proud of you. Congratulations on your engagement, Sophia. You deserve every happiness. I'm getting help, going to the addiction meetings, working steady. I won't bother you again. Just wanted you to know." I signed it Carmen and dropped it in the mailbox, even though I knew they might never read it. Maybe it was just for me, proof that I was finally starting to wake up. That night, I went back to my hovel and made myself a bowl of rice and beans. The cat came back, curling up on the windowsill. I turned off the lamp and sat in the dark, listening to the rain hit the roof. It wasn't a perfect life, but it was mine, a life I was earning, one fold of laundry at a time. I didn't know if I'd ever be able to make up for the past, but for the first time in years, I had hope, not for a big win at the casino, but for a quiet, steady future. And maybe, one day, if I kept trying, I could learn to forgive myself. That was the best I could do.